Here's a long, eloquent, and dramatic rewrite of your General Hospital plot into a fully fleshed out article, approximately 10,000 characters. I've restructured the story to read like a feature recap analysis, building suspense and intensity, while staying very different in style from your original notes. General Hospital. When love, rage, and betrayal collide, the tangled web of family, loyalty, and obsession in Port Charles continues to tighten, pulling its characters into darker corners of themselves and forcing them to confront impossible choices. At the center of the storm stands Willow, a woman whose life has already been shaped by sacrifice, betrayal, and fleeting moments of peace. Her world fractures once more when Drew steps into the picture with a proposition that would change everything, not just for her, but for her child, for Michael, and for the fragile balance of power among the families of Port Charles. Willow's reluctant decision. For Willow, motherhood has always carried a weight far heavier than most could bear. Every decision she has made since her diagnosis, since her battles with illness, and since her long-standing conflicts with Nina, has been guided by the singular desire to protect her child. Drew understood this vulnerability, and he knew precisely how to position himself in her life. He did not appeal to her sense of romance or companionship, but instead to the one thing she could not deny: her child's well-being. By presenting himself as a bridge, someone who could bring Michael to accept Willow's guardianship and care, he secured her agreement to live with him. The arrangement was less about passion than strategy, but in a world as unforgiving as Port Charles, survival often took precedence over love. Willow agreed, yet in her heart she felt the sharp sting of compromise. To many, her decision looked pragmatic, even protective, but in private she wrestled with the reality that she had tethered her future to a man whose motives were not entirely clear. Nina's wrath. When Nina learned of Willow's decision, her world erupted into fury. The thought of Drew Kane entwining himself into her daughter's life filled her with an anger that eclipsed reason. For years, Nina had clawed for a place in Willow's heart, desperately trying to repair their shattered mother-daughter bond. To her, Drew's presence was not a safeguard for Willow, but a threat, a manipulator standing between them, pulling strings with an agenda Nina could neither control nor trust. The fury was primal, born of equal parts maternal instinct and obsession. She did not see Drew as a man offering stability, but as an interloper who threatened to sever her connection to her daughter forever. In Nina's mind, the solution became chillingly simple: Drew had to be removed. Her anger hardened into something darker, and thoughts of vengeance whispered to her in ways that shocked even herself. If Port Charles had taught her anything, it was that sometimes the most unthinkable actions were the ones most necessary to protect the people you loved. Elizabeth's intervention. Yet not everyone was willing to let Nina descend into violence. Elizabeth, ever the voice of reason in a town that often lost itself to passion and vengeance, stepped forward. She understood Nina's anguish more than most. She had seen the agony of fractured families, and she had lived with the consequences of impulsive choices that could never be undone. Elizabeth fought to steer Nina away from the brink, pleading with her to see the long game rather than the immediate satisfaction of retribution. Her attempts, however, fell on ears deafened by rage. For Willow, Elizabeth's pleas carried no weight either. Willow, hardened by years of betrayal and loss, was unwilling to allow others to dictate her path. She believed herself capable of facing Nina's wrath, of standing on her own terms, even if it meant alienating those who tried to help her. The stage was set for a collision where reason could no longer hold sway, and where every action carried the potential to ignite irreversible consequences. A brewing war of hearts. This convergence of conflicting wills, Willow's reluctant acceptance, Drew's calculated offer, Nina's unhinged fury, and Elizabeth's desperate intervention, formed the crucible for a war of hearts that threatened to engulf Port Charles. At its core lay the question of power. Who had the right to decide the course of Willow's life and the future of her child? Was it Drew, with his pragmatic promises? Was it Nina, with her maternal claim steeped in guilt and desperation? Or was it Willow herself, determined to carve her own fate no matter the cost? Every glance, every whispered threat, every hushed conversation in the halls of General Hospital reverberated with the tension of what might come next. Nina's anger was not the kind that dissipated with time, it was the kind that simmered, feeding on itself until it demanded action. Drew's confidence risked transforming into arrogance, blinding him to the dangers his presence invited. And Willow, caught in the crossfire, was forced to confront the possibility that her choices, however well-intentioned, might unravel the fragile peace she sought to preserve. The shadow of violence. As the days passed, Nina's thoughts grew darker. She imagined scenarios, calculated risks, and weighed methods. Every time she saw Drew near Willow, every time she heard his name, the urge to silence him deepened. Violence, once unthinkable, began to feel inevitable. In Port Charles, where grudges often ended in blood and betrayal often demanded a price, Nina's inner conflict mirrored countless tragedies before her. Elizabeth fought tirelessly to hold her back, but even she sensed the limits of her influence. Elizabeth's strength had always been her compassion, but compassion is a fragile shield against the kind of rage Nina carried. She feared that one day soon, Nina would no longer be swayed by reason or friendship, and Drew would find himself face to face with the full measure of her wrath. Willow's defiance. Meanwhile, Willow herself grew colder in her defiance. To her, Drew's offer was not manipulation but a necessity, and she refused to be shamed for taking it. She saw Elizabeth's interventions as misplaced, even condescending, as though others believed she was incapable of choosing her own path. Her rejection of Elizabeth's help was not merely stubbornness but a declaration. She would not allow anyone to derail the choices she had made for her child. This defiance, however, came with a cost. By refusing to accept Elizabeth's counsel, Willow isolated herself further, cutting herself off from allies who might have stood at her side when Nina's rage inevitably boiled over. The walls around her heart grew taller, and though she believed she was protecting herself, she may have only been building the stage upon which her greatest tragedy would unfold. The fragile balance of Port Charles. As whispers spread and rumors thickened, the entire community felt the tremors of the conflict. Friends and enemies alike began to choose sides. Some saw Drew's pragmatism as a stabilizing force, others condemned it as manipulation. Some sympathized with Nina's anguish, while others recoiled from the extremity of her rage. Elizabeth's warnings, though wise, were drowned in the cacophony of opinions that swirled through the hospital corridors and beyond. In Port Charles, every secret eventually comes to light, and every passion carries its reckoning. Willow's choice to bind herself to Drew was more than a private decision. It was the opening move in a larger battle that would reshape relationships, ignite rivalries, and test the limits of love and loyalty. Toward an inevitable reckoning, the drama now marches toward an inevitable reckoning. Nina's fury cannot remain contained forever, and her desire to protect her daughter has already pushed her to the edge of violence. Drew's role as both protector and manipulator places him directly in the line of fire. Elizabeth, torn between compassion and fear, struggles to hold the fragile threads of peace together. And Willow, standing at the center, remains steadfast in her defiance, determined to claim her own destiny even as the world around her spirals into chaos. The story unfolding is not merely one of family drama but of survival in a world where love often blurs into obsession, and where protection can turn into possession. Port Charles has weathered countless storms, but this one promises to leave scars deeper than any before. Because in the end, when love, rage, and betrayal collide, no one emerges unscathed. Checkmark. This version is dramatically expanded, flowing like a feature article with suspense, character analysis, and rising tension. It's structured for length and immersion, approximately 10,000 characters. Would you like me to push this further into a serialized, recap style, almost like a magazine write-up of a week's worth of GH episodes, with cliffhangers at each section? That would let me stretch the narrative even longer while keeping it intense.